Hi, I'm Caden here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On today's episode of Eating W's, we have our NFL Week 9 Pick'em prediction episode for the 2024 NFL season. But before we get rolling into those games, just a quick update on Cal and I's head-to-head Pick'em. For the first time in like 5 weeks, I actually did better and kind of halted Callan's comeback. I put up a total of 14 points, which is a very good week, but Callan also put up a very respectable 10 points, putting us at new totals of me with 90 total points and Callan with 76 total points. So last week gap was 10. I may be able to extend it out a little bit more to 14 again. So we will see what this week brings, starting with the Thursday night football game in an AFC matchup of the Houston Texans heading up to New York to take on the New York Jets. And we start by agreeing, as we seem to always do with Thursday night football, we both have the Texans in this one. I think that the Texans, even without Stephon Diggs, who, as we mentioned, will now be missing the rest of the season with a torn ACL, are still able to pick up a win against the Jets because, to be honest, their receiving corps was so good to start the year that even losing a guy like Stephon Diggs, losing a guy like Nico Collins, they still have far from the worst receiving corps in the NFL this year. Their top three right now is still Tank Dell, who was an absolute baller last year, John Mechie, who just continues to get better after coming back from literally having cancer, and Xavier Hutchinson, who's another young guy who doesn't get a ton of play time, but really takes advantage of his play time and plays well when he does. So to still have those guys be your top three receivers after losing your top two receivers is absolute insanity for the Houston Texans. But that's not even mentioning the rest of their offense. That's still very good. They still have a very solid offensive line. CJ Stroud is looking very wise beyond his years back there, still at the quarterback position. And Joe Mixon is kind of rejuvenated his career there in Houston and is looking like one of the better running backs in the leagues again. So more than the Jets losing, which they very much have been, I don't know what's going on with the Jets, that they have looked rough recently. I think that the Texans, even through these injuries, still continue to win. Their defense has had little to no injuries. They still are at full power. Will Anderson Jr., after a Rookie of the Year season last year, seems to just keep getting better week after week, which doesn't even seem fair that he keeps getting better because he's already so damn good, but he really does seem to. So even with these injuries, I think that the Houston Texans are still a force to stop in the AFC.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a tough one for the Jets because the Houston Texans are coming in hot, and the Jets are just a dumpster fire.
Really are. It's bad.
I don't know why. I don't know why. They have the talent there. It's really, I think it's on the coaching. I think Ulbricht's way in over his head. He's completely overwhelmed by everything. He's used to just calling the defensive side of the ball, and now he's kind of losing track of that by having to monitor the offense now. And Aaron Rodgers, I'm sure, doesn't make that any easier. No. So we'll have to see if maybe all this chaos and the Jets being a wounded animal backed up in the corner, maybe this is the time that they strike back and surprise us. But it might be too little too late because they are in a division where the Bills are 6-2, and the Bills have essentially a 4.5 game lead on them because they have a win over the Jets already. So we'll have to see how well the Jets play, if they can come back and surprise us. But I think that the way that especially Joe Mixon has played, like you said, him really kind of rejuvenating his career. He has, I believe, 3 straight games with 100 yards and a touchdown. So we'll have to see if he can continue that streak, and I think he will against this suddenly leaky Jets defense.
I would love to see a video of Ulbrich try to tell Rodgers to do anything, because I bet it's borderline soap opera with the way Rodgers reacts. It would be so it's gonna be so funny to continue to monitor those sideline interactions. But moving on to our next game on the slate for this one, I was actually very borderline if we should even talk about this game. I made my pick the way I did, and was like, yeah, maybe we should talk about it. I kind of have some good reasoning. And then Callan sent me his picks fully separately made, and I was like, well, now we definitely have to talk about it. Next up, we have an AFC East matchup with the Miami Dolphins heading to Buffalo to take on the Bills. And Cal and I both have the Dolphins in this one, and both have the Dolphins as our upset. Now, I'll say my reasoning first, but I got to imagine, I haven't heard him say, so I'm not sure yet, but I'd imagine his reasoning is pretty damn similar. But the the Dolphins always seem to split this series. I don't know how they do it. It doesn't matter how good the Bills are, how good they are, how bad the other team is. This series somehow always goes 1-1, which is why, if you remember correctly, the first time they faced a couple weeks back, I can't remember which week it was exactly, it was in Miami, and Cal and I both also picked the Dolphins in that one because we were like, they always split the series, they always win at home, so I gotta imagine they do it. But then the Bills go into Miami and find a way to pick up a win. So now this time, against all better judgment.
That was the game Tua got hurt.
That was the game.
So we'll see if that happens again.
Poor guy. So against all my better judgment, against any true football knowledge or gut feelings that I have, I'm going to go with the Miami Dolphins as my upset, solely off the fact that I think that they always split this series year in and year out, but it could easily blow up in my face.
It definitely could, because it all depends on how Tua plays. And I think that's the reason that the Dolphins win, is I think Tua comes back and has revenge against the Buffalo Bills. And also because this is a divisional game. And no matter what the records are, divisional games are always tough. They're always different. Just look at the Jets-Patriots last week, where that was supposed to be an easy win for the Jets. But nonetheless, a Patriots win in a divisional game. And look for the Dolphins to kind of get an upset here a little bit, because the Bills are favored, although not by much. It is in Buffalo, which is going to be tough for the Dolphins to come up there, but they kind of got a lucky break because it's not that dead of winter yet in Buffalo. So they got a bit of a lucky break there with, I think, more mild temperatures right now in Buffalo. So that, I think, will play in the Dolphins' favor. And also, I believe in the reemergence of that Dolphins running game, where Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert have reemerged as perennial running back touchdown leaders, both getting touchdowns in last week's game, and Achane almost breaking 100 yards. In fact, going over 100 total yards rushing and receiving. So that was really big for the Dolphins to see. And it seems like they're just a different team with Tua. For whatever reason, Tua brings the energy. He brings their belief that they can win. And when he's gone, they lose that belief. And now that he's back, and as long as he can stay healthy and doesn't do a QB power right out of the gate, right in Damar Hamlin's chest again, then I think the Dolphins will be fine, and they'll get a shocking victory in Orchard Park this week.
Yeah, the Dolphins, you are spot on. They're just a different team with Tua, which I don't get it. As I've said before, I don't think Tua's bad, but I don't think he's by any means like a top of the line quarterback. But the Dolphins seem to. They seem to have all the trust in the world in him, because they sure play better when he's there. But jumping quite a bit down the list, all the way to our game of the week with the afternoon game in an NFC North matchup of the Green Bay Packers heading to Detroit to take on the Lions. And we disagree in this one. I have the Lions, and Callan, of course, has the Packers.
I believe in the Packers this week, and this is on the basis that Jordan Love plays, because I think that if Malik Willis plays, I'm a little afraid that the Lions are going to get in his head and be able to beat Malik Willis, but I don't know if they'll be able to beat Jordan Love, who was able to put on quite a show last year against the Lions on Thanksgiving, and he still owed his turkey leg from that Lions Thanksgiving game as Jordan Love. So we'll see if he's able to get that this week. And also, one reason I also believe in the Packers is the running game of Josh Jacobs, who went over 90 yards rushing last week. And even though he has yet to break 100 yards, he just has a different running style to him, one that I'm not used to the Packers having. Where, I mean, you can see it with Aaron Jones. He's more of that elusive, outside the numbers runner. Jacobs is a between the tackles, up the middle kind of guy. He's going to get you 2-3 yards no matter what, because he's going to fall forward. And that's what I really like out of Jacobs. And another reason that I like the Packers, I like for them to force a couple of of Detroit Lions turnovers, where it is a home game for the Packers. So I look for that energy to really be on the defensive side of the ball and really force the Lions into a couple of early mistakes. And I look for the Packers to capitalize on those mistakes. And I think that's one way they win this game is to capitalize on mistakes that the Lions make.
Yeah, certainly. You're spot on with Josh Jacobs. I do really like the way he runs. He's one of those running backs you like to see who wants the contact. He doesn't just get contact. He doesn't just go hit people. He thrives on going and making that contact, bringing the boom himself. And that, of course, always leads to him falling forward, like you mentioned. But yeah, I think regardless, the Lions win this game, whether it's Malik Willis back there, whether it's Jordan Love back there. But at the same time, I do think that they play Jordan Love this game. We are getting far enough into the season. We are in way too good of a division with this NFC North division this year to give up divisional games like this. And I mean, throwing in Malik Willis against those AFC South teams, against those lesser teams when you had to, is one thing. And you were able to pick up wins, so that was awesome.
And teams he had knowledge against.
He doesn't have knowledge against the Lions. No. And I think throwing in Malik Willis against the Lions is all but a white flag. I really do. Of course, you're still going to go out there and try. You're going to give your best effort. It's just a victim of circumstance with Jordan Love's injury and the bye week being the week after that. But if Malik Willis goes in there, they just get absolutely shredded, torn apart. If Jordan Love plays, I think it's very much a game, but I think that the Lions still handle it pretty easily. Maybe not quite easily, but I see this still being a 2-possession game, 10, 14 points, somewhere in that area. But the Lions are just such a good team this year. I thought when they lost Aiden Hutchinson, it might kind of might put a wooden stake through the chests of the Vampire Lions, but it just didn't. They're still just as strong. They've learned to do without him. They've learned a great rotation of edge rushers and young guys that they have, and they just continue to thrive. So they're a tough team, and I don't see a world where the Packers beat them. But I think it should be a good game nonetheless. I do, especially only if Love plays, I should say. But
it'll be an interesting coaching matchup where
definitely
it's very good coaching on both sides right now.
Definitely, 100%. So now moving on to our 2 primetime games, starting with Sunday Night Football and another NFC North team. We have the Indianapolis Colts heading to Minnesota to take on the Vikings, and we agree again. We both have the Vikings in this one. An announcement that actually just happened today, not due to any sort of injury. The Colts are benching Anthony Richardson as quarterback, so Joe Flacco will be starting for the Indianapolis Colts this week, which is so much more scary. I really wish they would have just started Anthony Richardson, because I know it sounds insane to say, but I would much rather face Anthony Richardson than Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco is just so experienced, and this defense in general is very good, don't get me wrong, but they're very young. And I'm not saying they're even inexperienced or anything like that, because they play wise beyond their years. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. They just don't have, 15, 16 years of experience the way Joe Flacco does? Maybe not quite that much, but he's definitely pushing it at the very least. He had to be like the 2011, 2012 draft class, if not even before that. So that's just something that you can't teach, is having over a decade of experience on the field. And that kind of scares me. So nonetheless, I think that the Vikings do pick up a win, whether Flacco goes out there or Anthony Richardson goes out there, kind of akin to what I just said with the Lions. But I think that we see 2 very different games with Anthony Richardson compared to Joe Flacco. I do think we also see a resurgence of this Vikings offense and this Vikings trenches. Because like I mentioned in yesterday's episode, I think that game against the Rams was far and away our worst trenches game on both the offensive and defensive line sides of the ball. So I think that guys come back with a vengeance. I'm interested to see how Cam Robinson, the new left tackle fill-in for the recently injured Christian Darrisaw, does. But more than anything, I very much see a return to form by our blitz game and our defensive line in general.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be huge if that happens for this Vikings team to win, because they're going up against Jonathan Taylor, who's having a resurgence kind of season, even though he's missed a few games. But when he's been on the field, he's been strong. So we'll have to see how well they're able to contain him, because he'll be key if the Colts do win this game. But because of the game being in Minnesota, I feel like it just leans in the Vikings' favor, where I think that this is going to be a really good game. a back and forth style game, a game similar to the Packers Texans game from earlier this year, where both teams were back and forth and it ended on a game winning field goal. Now, who gets the game winning field goal? I'm not sure if it's the Colts or the Vikings. I was really back and forth on this pick because, and especially we made this pick before knowing that Joe Flacco was going to start. Now I'm really going back and forth on this pick. But because the Vikings are at home, I know that's just a different animal when they're at home. It's a different atmosphere for the Vikings. And I think because of that, they're able to squeak away with a victory.
Yep. So finally, we got our last game of this week with our Monday Night Football game of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers heading to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. And we finish off this week by agreeing again. We both have the Kansas City Chiefs in this one. I don't have a ton to say about this game because it's not like a overly important matchup. Both of these teams do kind of need a win, less or more the Bucs than the Chiefs, but it's an out of conference matchup, a lot of different things there. But nonetheless, I think this is going to be a much better game than people are going to give it credit for. The Buccaneers, of course, are just torn apart in their wide receiver room, playing with some guys not near as good as the Texans' top 3 wide receivers after losing their top receivers. The Bucs are in a little bit of a different situation. They don't quite have the depth in the receiver room, but they still have enough talent and enough heart for a guy like Baker Mayfield to take advantage of that and still put up a decent performance. So, long story short, I think that the Bucs put up a really good effort here, and I think that they keep this game really close against the best team in the NFL right now, the only undefeated team. I just don't see any way that the Chiefs lose this game, especially with it being in Kansas City.
Yeah, unfortunately, because of that being in Kansas City, I think it's just going to be too much for the Buccaneers to overcome. And one thing that I'm going to look for is one thing we forgot to mention in the trades yesterday, but the Chiefs getting DeAndre Hopkins.
Oh, yes, we did.
Huge for the Kansas City Chiefs, who lost both Rashee Rice and Juju Smith-Schuster. So they needed a wide receiver, and boy, did they get one with DeAndre Hopkins, who went from one of the worst teams in the NFL to one of the best teams in the NFL. And he gets the connection going with Patrick Mahomes, and look out, because that's going to be a whole new dimension to that offense being with DeAndre Hopkins now, because he can go stretch the field or he can be a possession receiver. And even though he is on the latter half of 32, I think that he still can make a huge impact in the NFL, and he will make a huge impact for this Chiefs team. And because the Chiefs are at home, I think that the Bucs, like you said, I think they keep it close, but I think it's just too much for the Bucs to overcome, and the Chiefs have too much talent on the offensive side of the ball now for the Bucs defense to match up against them.
Do you think Hopkins is still elite? Do you think he's
I
that
think
much
this
of a difference
makes him
maker?
elite. Does that? I think this.
You think he was just like a victim of circumstance?
A victim of circumstance,
Yeah.
yes, because he was elite with Kyler Murray. He was elite.
He did
with
look good with Kyler Murray.
Matt Schaub,
Deshaun Watson.
Deshaun Watson,
Matt
yeah.
Schaub.
I'm thinking too far back.
No, you're thinking pre-massages Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
He was a much better player.
He was a much better quarterback.
But no, I could definitely see him making me eat my words, but I gotta be honest, I think DeAndre Hopkins is a little washed. I don't think he was by any means in a good situation in Tennessee, but I don't think he was in such a bad situation that he should have been as quiet as he was in Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you said, going to a place like Kansas City, getting a guy like Patrick Mahomes can make even the most washed look new again. But we'll see what he does. It'll be very interesting to see what he can do on Monday. So that was our NFL Week 9 prediction episode. No episodes next week, so you do not have to stay tuned in this time around. I will actually be out of the country in Mexico for a friend's wedding. Mm-hmm. So Cal and I will still put up our predictions like this for Week 10 so we can keep track of the score, and either we'll throw it up at the start of the episode in 2 weeks, or maybe Cal will post it on his social media. We'll get it out some way. We'll make sure that you see our Week 10 predictions, but there will be no episodes next week. Mm-hmm. So in 2 weeks, make sure to stay tuned in. But until then, don't forget
to eat the W.